If you're looking to set up a garden irrigation system to kind of make your life easier and to save on water, I mean, essentially drippers will do that for you, you've come to the right place. I've used these drippers inside the house for a number of years for my own hydroponics and found that they work really well. So here's everything that I've learned, and I'll give you a bunch of tips to kind of go along. So the first thing I'd like to talk about is what you see right behind me here. I'd recommend that you get yourself a barrel if you plan on doing any kind of drip irrigation. This is going to help your water warm up before it goes to your plants. Now, plants hate ice water, especially when it's hot outside. So if you fill this thing up the night before, or you fill it up with whatever you want, it gives that water a chance to warm up before you're going to put it onto your plants. It also lets you mix anything that you want. Now, I've got 3 different connections, or 3 different ways to fill this barrel. I can use the garden hose, or I can pump up my fish tank, and that goes to fill in the barrel when I do a fish tank water change, because fish poop is fantastic for plants. Or I can also use my premixed hydroponic nutrients that's in the barrel, or this big tote right behind me, and I can pump and fill the barrel that way. Alternatively, if I wanted to, I could add fertilizer or anything else right into that barrel, mix it up, and that goes right onto the garden. So it gives me a bunch of different options right away, as well as providing warmer water for my plants. Second tip I'll give you is use brand name drippers. Don't use some of the adjustable ones that you might find on Amazon. Stick with Rainbird. I've used these things for years, and they just continue to work flawlessly, provided you have some kind of a filtration, but we'll get to that later on in the video here. You'll also see when you pick up the Rainbird drippers, there's a bunch of different models out there, 1 gallon, 2 gallon, 0.5, whatever. I'd say stick with a 1 gallon per hour. That's been rock solid, and it's pretty no-brainer. Then if you have a plant that you know is going to need a lot more water, just use multiple drippers on it. But this kind of keeps your life a whole lot simpler than having to stock all these different drippers. Now, as you can see in the system that I've got here, I've also got some white line, which is actually just standard house PEX line, which is super cheap to pick up. You can also pick up just the Rainbird 1/2-inch tubing to kind of carry your water, and that's where you actually puncture through to get your drip lines on. An easy way to connect the two if you do want to interchange them, and I do like to use the PEX lines to kind of make my tees, and then I just use the drip line where I'm actually dripping the water, is shark bites. I know they're a little bit pricey, so you might want to just stick with the 1/2-inch Rainbird lines, but just giving you some options there. Shark bites are an easy way though to connect those up if you want to interchange or go back and forth between the two. Otherwise, anything going from like a garden hose, you're always going to need adapters and stuff, but you can probably figure it out pretty quick at a local hardware store. As mentioned, if you're going to be using a barrel like this, you're going to also need a pump. I recommend using the fully submersible pumps. They're cheap and they last forever. The model I'm using in this one here is an 800 gallon per hour pump, and I'll also leave links down in the description for anything that I do use throughout the video here, so it saves you guys time in trying to find this stuff on your own. Now, the other thing we do need to talk about is if you're going to be using a barrel and you're going to be using a pump. In this case, my barrel is slightly elevated here, you can see. So it's higher than my garden, so as soon as that pump kicks in, it's going to want to just continue to siphon. So you will need to install a siphon brake. It's not complicated. Here's an easy way to do that. As you can see here, all I did is I hooked it up initially to the pump with a garden hose. That goes into a T, and then I put one of these flow stop garden hose fittings on there. And all that does is when the pump is on, it allows all the water to go down the lines. And as soon as the pump turns off, there's going to be a vacuum created at the top of that elbow. And what that vacuum does is it just opens up that valve and it'll suck air instead of sucking the water, essentially breaking the siphon. Now, cost-wise to set this up, if you're looking at starting it out, you don't have to go elaborate, you don't have to get fancy. It's going to be like $150-ish to get yourself a pump, get yourself the kits, then the lines to kind of get started and get your first section of your garden or whatever plants you want to irrigate set up. Just a quick note, pay attention to the head height. And all that is just, it lets you know how high the pump will pump straight up. So, for example, like if I was using I was using that pump to pump up there. I just have to make sure that the pump can pump whatever head height that is. In this case, that pump will do the trick, but I'll show you what I'm doing there a little later on in the video. Another kind of perk of adding a pump and adding that is, I mean, they're what, 30 bucks? So if you add a pump, you can also automate it if you have a home automation hub, which I happen to have a Habitat C8 elevation. Yeah, that's the one I've got. And it's very easy to add timers. You can see on top of the tank here, the white plugs. Those are two Sengold Zigbee switches, and they're onto my hub. Those are dual purpose use. I use them elsewhere for Christmas time for lights and stuff outside. Anyway, it's very easy to take those switches, automate them, and you can run automations for your garden if you want it to run first thing in the morning every day. And then if it gets hot and dry like it is out here today, I can just click on a button and add an automation to water the garden for any duration of time that I choose. Automation will also let you do cool little things like add a button. For example, up here, you see I've got just watering cans. Now we use this to water the stuff on the deck. Now all you have to do is time how long it takes to fill up a jug, build in an automation switch, and have it run for that duration. After that, use one watering can, put it there, click the button, take the other watering can that's full, and you come back, the other one's been filled up because you've timed it and the automation has done that for you. So you don't have to stand there waiting for it. Just simple little things you can build in, right? Now, something else to note with the drippers, you want to make sure that the lines always stay clear and clean. You don't want schmutz or garbage getting in there. And because this is an open barrel outside, an easy way to get around that is to just buy these paint strainer bags. You can pick them up at any local hardware store, and they're dirt cheap. And just zip tie your pump inside that paint strainer bag. This way any garbage or junk is going to be stuck on the outside of that bag. And if you need to, you can always rinse out your barrel and clean it up. Now when installing your drippers, something to keep in mind as well is if you just push directly into this pipe, you might puncture or damage the backside. If you just give it a squeeze and then kind of push the dripper into the bulging part, that'll keep it from poking on the backside. Another thing that makes it a whole heck of a lot easier putting the drippers in is if you let this thing sit in the sun for all of like 10-15 minutes before you start putting your dripper lines in too. That makes this stuff much softer. And it also gives a better seal, I find, than if you do it when it's cold. Now, if you guys do decide to put up an irrigation system for your garden, use the links down in the description below to help you find this stuff on Amazon. Plus, it does also help and support this channel. If there's any questions you guys have too in regards to putting this drip irrigation in, or if there's stuff that you guys would like to see, like how I set up the automation to exactly fill up a watering can, I can do a detailed video on that and show you how I set that up in Habitat, or different kind of automations where you can be a little more elaborate with Habitat. Anyway, till next time, we'll see you guys again.